is it might not look like something huge until you stand before Jesus and he says, good job. That brings us to the second thing, and that is, don't try to be great. Okay? God may have great things for you. He may have a position that will look great in the eyes of men, but generally, pursuing greatness in the eyes of men can only damage your soul. The trick, the key, is to seek to be good, to seek to follow Jesus in every possible way, and leave greatness in the eyes of men to God. Because generally what happens is people don't be great by wanting to be great. They get great by being good, by trying to follow Jesus, and by God just happening to put them in the right place at the right time. And you can't really make that happen. Number 3 then, there will be hard times. Okay, so this was something that really made me laugh, was sitting up in front of the homeschool class of 2013 and saying, the worst days of your life are in front of you. But in a lot of ways, that's really true. I mean, you know at this point that there are no happily ever afters, right? You can have dreams and things you're looking forward to, but don't ever think, I'm going to reach that point and everything's going to be great after that, because that's not going to happen until you die. Now, the good news is that when you die, it does happen, and you do enter into a time when it's happily ever after. But on this side of death, that doesn't happen at all, which means that the rest of your life is going to be a lot like the first part of your life has been. There are going to be good parts, and there are going to be bad parts. So in your life, you've had celebrations that were great, and you've had times of pain. You've experienced hard things. You've experienced people betraying you. You've been left out of things. You've been mistreated. You know that bad things happen in the world. There are explosions. There are natural disasters. There are dangerous creatures like banana spiders. You've done fun things too, right? It's like you've learned to drive. You've felt the exultation of mobility. You've watched movies with your friends like Iron Man and Die Hard, right? There are all kinds of things that you've done that have been really fun. And there will continue to be fun things and hard things. There will continue to be things that are great victories and things that are really scary and difficult. Now, the cool part, given that there's more of your life in front of you than behind you, is that the highest points of your life are probably in front of you. You're probably going to see and do cooler things than you've ever done before. But it's also true that the most painful parts of your life are probably in front of you. And there will be times that it will be bad. There will be times that it will be so bad that you wonder if we lied to you about the whole Jesus thing. And things will be so unhappy and miserable that you wonder if it's even possible that there could really be a loving God in charge of things if things are this bad. So, the third thing that I want to do then is give you some advice. In hard times, cling to Jesus. And that's the hard lesson that most of us have learned. When times are hard, you cling to Jesus and he gets you through. Sometimes there will be temptations to give up on the faith completely because it's bound to be easier than this. It turns out it's not. It turns out life is just as painful when you're not following Jesus. You just don't have as much help. So cling to Jesus and persevere. Don't be fooled into thinking that life will ever be easy. Jesus knew it wasn't going to be easy. That was why he said, if you want to follow me, pick up your cross and follow me. And the cross, right, is a device for dying on. Not just in the big way, which would make it kind of simpler, but in lots of little ways all the time. So anyway, be prepared for that. Persevere and follow Jesus. Number 4, about your destiny. God has a wonderful plan for your life, and you need to know that most of the time you're not going to know what that is. Paul talked about it in the Bible, and he says it's like looking through a glass darkly. You remember that line? So there's this thing like you're trying to see what your future is, and you're looking through a pane of glass that has been smeared with mud and painted on. And you see little glimpses, and sometimes you think you recognize something, and then you discover that it's not right. Most of the time, that's what accomplishing the plan of God looks like. So, this is what I'm going to say, and I'm going to say it again because I've seen a lot of young people come out of high school, come out of college, excited to pursue God's plan for them, and then get completely paralyzed because they weren't sure what God's plan was. So here it is. Most of the time you're not going to be sure, so this is what you do when you're not sure about God's plan for you. You pray, you take your best guess and you pursue it as though you're sure. Does that make sense? Okay, you pray, you take a guess and say, I think this may be what God wants, and then you go for it as hard as you can. The reason you go for it hard is because most of the time you're going to be right. The second part of that is, if you're not right, you can trust God to straighten your path out. It turns out that God is much better at correcting people that are already moving than he is at correcting people that are sitting here paralyzed. So, oh my gosh, if you hear one thing out of this talk, hear that. Take your best guess and go for it, and trust God to correct it. Now, here's one thing you can be sure of. I always get afraid that I am missing God's voice. That somehow my ability to not hear is more powerful than God's ability to speak loud. Do y'all ever worry about that? Do you ever think he's saying something you can't hear? Stop worrying about that. Let me promise you, God can always speak more loudly than you cannot hear. So for instance, you remember Jonah, right? What did God do to Jonah to get the message across to him? Swallows it with a whale. Do you think you could miss that? You think spending 3 days in a whale's belly, you're going to go, I just don't know if God is trying to speak to me or not. Right? Paul was trying to pursue God and doing some stupid things. And when God wanted to get his attention, he knocked him off a horse and blinded him. You can trust your God to speak loudly enough that you can hear when he needs you to hear. And if you're making a guess and you're going for it, and you don't hear him swallowing you with a whale or knocking you off a horse and blinding you, it's probably because you're pretty much going the right direction. Does that make sense? Okay, so don't be scared of that. Okay, there it is. That's your destiny. Number one, it may not look to you the way you think it's going to look. It'll be wonderful in God's eyes. 2, don't try to be great. Leave that up to God. 3, there will be hard times. Cling to Jesus. 4, most of the time you won't be sure what God's plan is. So, that's about your destiny. Now let me talk about your faith. Are you guys okay with this? Y'all doing all right? Okay. If you get bored with this, do what I do, just text. Friends and stuff. And I've got my ringer off, but it can buzz, so if you text me, I will get it and I can't respond. So you guys can't do that because they can all see you. Okay, so let's talk about your faith. It turns out that the next year and a half is going to be the most vulnerable that your faith will ever be in your entire life. And I want to explain why, and I want to tell you how to avoid the problems that are going to happen. The statistics are pretty terrifying. The statistics about people graduating from high school and moving into college are that 60 to 70% of our most ardent and committed Christian young people will give up their faith in the next year. Now, my bet is that everybody in the audience right now is trying to figure out why that's not going to happen to their kid. And you guys are sitting there thinking, well, yeah, that happens to other people, but it won't happen to me because of, and you're filling in the blank, because I am so tall. It will not happen to me because my denomination has better theology. It will not happen to me because I am homeschooled. The thing that I want you to know is that homeschool is no protection against what happens to people's faith in the next year. The statistics say that it happens just as often to homeschool kids as it does to Christian public school kids, as it does to Christian school kids. And we're not talking about like your average church-going kid. We're talking about kids that love the Lord, are active in mission trips, or active in youth group, and still the majority of them lose their faith in the first year after they leave high school. So let me explain why it happens. It happens because you guys are moving out of your parents' house. And as you move out of your parents' house, a lot of you are going to be moving to a different location, a different town. You're giving up a lot of relationships. You're giving up relationships with the people whose house you've lived in for 18 years. You're giving up relationships with your best friends. Not like you're not going to be able to text them and Facebook them, but they're not going to be around all the time, and it's just different. You're moving out of the church where people have known you for a long time, where all the adults think you're wonderful and all the young people look up to you. You're going to try to attend church in college and discover nobody there even knows who you are. That feeling of specialness that you feel in your church isn't going to happen. It turns out that as people give up their relationships and move on to the next phase of life, they get really lonely. Almost nobody talks about this, but most people are really very lonely in their first year of college. So they go into their first year of college, they make friends. It's interesting. They make friends by proximity. That in general, the friends that people make in college are the ones that live closest to them in their first couple of weeks, just because they're close. So it's going to be the people in your dorm, the people down your, that are in the apartment next door. So you get to college, you've cut yourself off from these relationships, you're lonely, everybody else around you is lonely too, and you're trying to make friends, and it's hard to make good friends. It takes a long time. We don't think about that because we've kind of grown up with each other. But it takes a long time to make friends that feel real close. And so people are desperately trying to make friends. They're cut off from the relationships that rooted their faith. And they end up doing the things that other people are doing. They end up drinking, they end up having sex, they end up taking drugs, they end up doing all the things that you guys right now cannot imagine in a million years that you would do. But I need you to know that your faith will be vulnerable over the next year. So here's how to avoid that. Here's how to take care of it. In general, colleges know that people are lonely in their first year, and they'll do everything they can to try to fill up your life. So in the first week of school, you will get invited to every club, every activity, every sport team possible. And by the end of the second week, your life will be full. All your time will be taken up. And if, in that first 2 weeks, you have not made a time and a place for Christian fellowship, if you have not made a time for people who love God that you can hang out with, you probably will not do that for the rest of your college career. No matter how good your intentions are, no matter how much mom and dad nag, if it doesn't happen in that first 2 weeks, it probably won't happen at all. So, here is Stephen's advice to you. And this is really the most important thing I want you to hear. When you leave this place, the first thing you do when your feet touch college campus is find fellowship. Find fellowship. Find a college group at a local church. Find an InterVarsity group. Find a campus crusade group. But find fellowship. That's the first thing you do when you get out of this place. Now, after that, there are going to be some things that you really feel like you need to do really badly. You're really going to want to use the bathroom. So after you find fellowship, you can use the bathroom. And after you use the bathroom, you can call me and say, Stephen, I found fellowship. Okay, or maybe not me, maybe your youth leader or your parent. But it's really important. So what's the first thing you do when you get to college campus? Find fellowship. What's the second thing you do? That's right, you pee. Good job. And what's the third thing you do? That's right, you call us and let us know. Okay, I want you to understand what a sacrifice this is for us. We desperately want to hear from you as soon as we can, but we are willing to sacrifice and let you pee first before you call us. Now, some of you guys are not going off to college. Some of you guys are going off to do a gap year thing, like you're going to go off to do a DTS